The signal first appeared as nothing more than a flicker of static, a weak pulse buried deep inside the noise of the universe. It repeated every 37 seconds, too faint for most ships to notice. But inside the communications bay of the UNS Valiant Spear, a young officer named Ren Armitage saw the pattern forming on his screen and froze. It wasn't random interference. It was an SOS. Someone, somewhere, was calling for help. At first, no one believed it was real. Space was full of echoes. Reflected signals from long-dead satellites, ancient distress calls looping for centuries. Ghosts whispering across the void. But when the ship's AI cross-referenced the transmission with the Galactic Coalition network, the result came back confirmed. A verified Coalition distress beacon, code class Omega. That meant only one thing: an official emergency call from a recognized colony or fleet, requiring immediate aid from any available force. Captain Arya Corrin stood on the command deck, her expression unreadable as the message played through the speakers. The voice was broken by static, the words fractured, but the desperation was clear. "Ship down. Survivors. Need assistance. Coordinates. Please." Then it cut out. Just like that. Silence. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. The coordinates placed the source at the edge of the Andarian expanse, a vast region of dark space rarely traveled and barely mapped. It was far from any trade route, far from any known colony. The closest outpost was nearly 2 weeks away at full FTL speed. The question hung in the air. Who was out there? "Prepare a response fleet," Corrin ordered, her voice calm but firm. "We're answering that call." The Valiant Spear was not a ship built for diplomacy or exploration. It was a Deathworlder vessel, one of the few ships designed to carry humans into the most hostile environments in the galaxy. To the rest of the Coalition, humanity was known as Deathworlders for good reason. Earth, their home, was considered a nightmare planet, full of predators, diseases, and disasters that would kill most alien species within minutes. Yet humanity had not only survived there, they had thrived. They had built ships that could cross the harshest voids, armor that could withstand radiation storms, and minds that refused to surrender. The fleet's orders were simple: locate the distress source, confirm survivors, and render assistance. It sounded routine on paper, but to Corrin it felt wrong. An Omega-level SOS in a dead sector? It was too convenient, too quiet. Still, duty demanded a response. Humanity's reputation for loyalty and courage left no room for hesitation. Within hours, the fleet was ready. 3 escort destroyers, Resolute, Hammerfall, and Nightingale, formed up beside the Valiant Spear. Their engines glowed blue against the darkness as they prepared to jump. From the observation deck, the stars shimmered like frost across glass, endless and cold. Corrin stood alone at the viewport, thinking about the old saying her father had taught her. When someone calls for help, you answer. No matter the risk. She whispered it under her breath, almost like a prayer. The jump drive engaged and reality twisted. The stars became lines of light, then nothing at all. For 7 days, the fleet traveled through hyperspace, a place where time stretched and folded like water around stone. The crew kept busy with drills and diagnostics, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Ren Armitage spent his nights replaying the distress signal, trying to clean up the audio, hoping to find a name or coordinates hidden in the static. Every time he tried, the signal seemed to grow fainter, as if it were dissolving with each passing hour. Finally, on the 8th day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace, and what they found was not a planet, but a graveyard. The space around them was filled with wreckage. Broken hulls drifted aimlessly, their metal surfaces scorched and pitted with age. Entire ships hung suspended in silence, their lights long dead. A faint ring of debris circled a small brown planet below. A world with no visible cities, no signals, no signs of life. The distress beacon still pulsed weakly from orbit, repeating the same broken plea for help. "Scan the area," Corrin said quietly. The sensors came alive, sweeping across the void. No active power signatures, no warp trails, no transmissions. It was as if time had stopped. "Captain," Ren said, his voice trembling slightly. "These ships, they're Coalition models, but the designs are old, centuries old." "How old?" 200 years, maybe more. That meant the SOS wasn't a recent call. It was ancient, an echo from a long-dead past. Somewhere down there, someone had once cried for help and no one had come. Until now. Corrin stared at the planet through the main viewport. Its surface was dark and storm-covered, with flashes of lightning breaking through thick clouds. Beneath those storms, faint energy readings flickered, too weak to be engines, but too regular to be natural. Something was still alive down there, or at least something was still moving. The logical choice was to mark the site, report back to command, and wait for a science team. But that wasn't Corin's way. "Prepare for descent," she said. "We're going down." Her officers hesitated. Lieutenant Voss, her tactical chief, frowned. "Captain, this planet's atmosphere is unstable. Radiation spikes in multiple zones. If those signals are just automated systems, we'll be risking—" Lives were risked the moment that SOS went unanswered. Corin interrupted. "We're not turning away now." Within the hour, the Valiant Spear dropped into orbit, its hull glowing as it cut through ion storms. The smaller dropships launched from its belly, carrying squads of Marines and scientists in reinforced armor. As they descended through the clouds, lightning flashed around them like veins of fire. The readings grew stronger, power grids, faint biosigns, structures buried beneath the storms. When the dropships finally broke through the clouds, the crew gasped. Below them stretched the remains of a city, not alien ruins, but something built in the shape of hope. Tall towers crumbled under centuries of decay. Roads were cracked and overgrown with strange glowing moss. Yet light still flickered in a few windows. Someone or something was still alive. The landing zone was a wide square filled with debris. As the Marines disembarked, their boots sank into dust that hadn't been disturbed in generations. The air was heavy, metallic, and sour with radiation. Through the fog, shadows moved, quick, human-shaped figures darting between ruins. "Movement detected," Wren said over comms from the ship. "Multiple contacts. No weapons visible. Hold fire," Corin ordered. Then a voice crackled through the static on an open channel, soft, shaking, and full of fear. "Please stay away." The words froze everyone in place. The translator system identified the dialect. It was an old variant of Standard, heavily degraded but understandable. The voice came from a settlement just a few kilometers away. "Identify yourself," Corin said gently. "We received your SOS. We're here to help." Silence followed, then laughter. A bitter, broken sound. "Help? You finally came. After all this time?" The Marines exchanged uneasy glances. The voice continued, trembling with emotion. "We saw your ships. We know who you are. You're the Deathworlders, aren't you? The monsters from the stories." The channel cut off. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the wind howling through ruined buildings. Then Corin took a slow breath. "They're afraid of us," she said softly. Voss frowned. "Afraid they sent an SOS?" "Yes," Corin replied. "But maybe they don't remember why." The realization sank in. If these survivors were the descendants of the original crew, they'd been isolated for centuries, generation after generation, growing up in fear and myth. To them, the galaxy had abandoned them. To them, help had never come. And now when armored humans descended from the skies in black ships, what else could they think but that the old monsters had finally arrived? Back aboard the Valiant Spear, the crew watched the surface scans unfold. Dozens of small settlements were scattered across the planet, connected by worn trails. Each emitted faint power signatures, enough for life support and shelter. There were thousands of people down there, an entire forgotten civilization born from a crash. Corin stood before the holographic map, her expression grave. "They're not just survivors," she said quietly. "They're descendants. They've built a world out of the ashes." Wren looked up from his console. "Captain, what if they don't want to be rescued?" She didn't answer at first. She thought of the broken voice, the laughter mixed with tears, the centuries of waiting. "Then we'll remind them," she finally said, "that help still exists." Outside the ship, the planet turned slowly below, its clouds glowing faintly with lightning. The ancient SOS continued to pulse in the background, steady, haunting, and eternal. For 200 years it had been calling into the darkness, waiting for someone to answer. Now humanity had answered, and none of them could have imagined what that would cost. The fleet floated in silence above the dark planet. From the bridge of the UNS Valiant Spear, the view was haunting, broken ships drifting aimlessly, their hulls torn and twisted, fragments glinting faintly under the light of a dying sun. It looked like a battlefield frozen in time. The ships bore different markings. Some were coalition vessels, others were unknown designs, possibly civilian transports, but all were dead. No signals, no power, no life, just metal bones and endless quiet. Captain Arya Corrin stood at the main viewport, her reflection faint against the stars. "So many ships," she murmured. "What happened here?" Her science officer, Lieutenant Wren Armitage, ran his hands quickly across the console. "Scans show no recent activity. The wrecks are ancient, maybe hundreds of years old. Radiation levels are consistent with decayed reactor cores. Whatever happened, it happened a long time ago. But something still sent the SOS. Somewhere on that planet beneath the clouds and storms, something was alive enough to keep that beacon running." That thought kept gnawing at everyone's mind. Corrin ordered a landing team to prepare. The fleet's destroyers formed a protective ring while the Valiant Spear lowered a series of probes toward the surface. The probes cut through the thick clouds, sending back shaky images. Endless storms, mountains split by lightning, and wide plains covered in strange glowing plants. Finally, one probe caught sight of a structure, a tall tower of dark metal, cracked and leaning but still standing. Near its base, small lights flickered, faint but unmistakable. "Confirmed power source," Wren reported. "Energy output is weak but stable. Definitely artificial." "Then that's our destination," Corrin said. The drop teams began their descent through the storm. Thunder rolled like distant explosions, and bolts of lightning flashed so close that the armor's visors auto-darkened. Inside her dropship, Corrin felt the shudder of turbulence as they broke through the atmosphere. The air outside was thick with dust and static. For a moment she thought she saw shapes moving in the storm, large, shifting silhouettes, but the sensors showed nothing. When the clouds finally thinned, the surface came into view. The land was scarred and lifeless, covered in blackened soil and twisted remains of buildings. It looked as though an entire city had once stood there but had been shattered by time and weather. Towers leaned at broken angles and glass domes were cracked open like eggshells. In the center of it all was the beacon tower, still pulsing its weak light into the darkness. The dropships landed in the shadow of the ruined buildings. The moment the ramp lowered, a blast of cold, sour air swept inside. The Marines stepped out carefully, weapons raised but not aimed. The ground was soft beneath their boots, almost like ash. Everything was silent except for the low hum of the beacon nearby. Wren's voice came through the comms from orbit. "We're getting faint biosigns all around you. Small clusters, humanoid in shape, but the readings are erratic. It's like they're hiding." "Understood," Corrin replied. "Keep scanning." As the team approached the beacon tower, they saw signs of habitation, makeshift shelters built from scavenged metal, fires still smoldering in small pits, footprints in the dust. Someone had been here recently. Corrin knelt beside one of the shelters. Inside were old tools, dried food, and something unexpected. A small, hand-carved figure made of stone. It was humanoid, wearing a helmet that looked strangely familiar. It looked like one of their own, one of the Deathworlders. Before she could speak, a movement caught her eye. A shadow darted between the ruins, then another. The Marines turned, scanning the area. "Show yourselves," Corrin called. "We're not here to harm you." For a long moment there was only silence. Then a voice echoed from somewhere ahead, shaky, filled with fear. "Stay back." The Marines froze. The voice was definitely alive, but it was old, weary and trembling. Through the mist, a group of figures appeared, thin, pale-skinned, wrapped in scraps of fabric and armor. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, a sign of long adaptation to the low light. They carried crude weapons made of metal and bone. One of them stepped forward, a woman, her face scarred but proud. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why did you come here?" Corrin removed her helmet, letting the air sting her skin. "We received your distress signal," she said gently. "We came to help," the woman laughed bitterly. "Help? You came to finish what your kind started." The Marines exchanged confused looks. "What are you talking about?" The woman pointed at the sky. "The Deathworlders. The monsters. The ones who burn worlds and take what they want. You wear their faces." Corrin's heart sank. In their eyes, humanity wasn't a savior. It was the enemy. These people weren't waiting for help. They were waiting for the return of the creatures they feared. Somehow, over the centuries, stories had twisted into nightmares. "We're not your enemies," Corrin said softly. "We're humans, yes, but we came because of your signal. Someone here asked for rescue." The woman stared at her for a long time. "Rescue? No one here believes in rescue. That beacon was never meant to call you." Before Corin could respond, a low rumble shook the ground. The Marines took defensive positions as dust fell from the ruined buildings. From behind the survivors, more figures appeared, men, women, and even children. Their clothes were torn, their faces gaunt, their eyes full of fear. Some carried spears. Others clutched stones. One of the children pointed at Corin's armor and whispered something. The word was faint, but the translator caught it. Deathbringer. Corin felt a chill go down her spine. These people had grown up with myths about her kind, stories of unstoppable soldiers from a world of fire. To them, the Deathworlders weren't heroes. They were demons. Ren's voice came through again. Captain, I'm detecting power surges beneath your position. There's an underground complex below the beacon. The energy readings match pre-collapse tech. It's possible that's where the signal originated. Copy that, Corin said. She turned to the woman. There's a facility under this tower, isn't there? The woman's expression hardened. That place is cursed. Our ancestors called it the Tomb of the First Ones. Those who go down there never return. Corin looked at her team. We're going in. The survivors backed away, murmuring in fear. One of them spat at the ground. Go then, monsters. The dead are waiting for you. They found the entrance half buried under rubble, a rusted metal hatch covered in strange markings. When they pried it open, a gust of cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of oil and decay. The stairs led deep underground into darkness. Their helmet lights cut narrow beams through the dust as they descended. The deeper they went, the more signs of the old colony appeared. Faded murals on the walls, cracked terminals still blinking faintly, and skeletons still seated at their posts. It was like stepping back in time, into the final moments of a civilization that had died waiting. At the lowest level, they found the source of the beacon, a central chamber filled with ancient equipment. In the middle stood the transmitter, still running after centuries, its core powered by a decaying fusion battery. Corin approached it carefully. Ren's voice came through the comm again. Captain, the beacon is connected to an old AI core. I can try to access it remotely. Do it, Corin said. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a flicker of light appeared on the console. A weak holographic projection formed, a woman's face pale and glitching. Her voice was faint, broken. Emergency? Survivors. Please send assistance. Corin felt her throat tighten. It was the same voice from the SOS, but as the message looped again, the projection changed. The face shifted to something else, a different recording. Warning. Unknown entities detected. Deathworlder fleet approaching. All survivors hide. Do not engage. The room went cold. The survivors above had been listening to this for generations. The beacon hadn't just sent an SOS. It had warned them about humanity. Somewhere in history, a terrible misunderstanding had occurred. When they returned to the surface, the survivors were waiting, armed and ready. We told you not to go there, the woman said, anger and fear in her voice. Now you've awakened the ghosts. Corin tried to explain what they'd found, but the tension was rising fast. The survivors thought the humans had reactivated something dangerous. They began shouting, moving closer, their weapons raised. The Marines didn't fire, they just stood still, trying to show they meant no harm. Then lightning struck nearby and chaos erupted. Someone screamed. A survivor threw a spear. A Marine's armor deflected it, but the sound of metal hitting metal echoed like thunder. Panic spread, hold fire! Corin shouted. But it was too late. The crowd scattered, vanishing into the ruins. The Marines stood frozen in the rain, their armor streaked with ash and water. Corin looked toward the tower where the beacon still blinked weakly, its light pulsing through the storm. For centuries, it had called out for help. Humanity had finally answered, but now it seemed the answer had come too late. As the fleet watched from orbit, Corin's final report for the day was simple. There are survivors, but they don't want to be saved. The rain fell without stopping, turning the broken city into a maze of mud, smoke, and flickering light. The UNS Valiant Spear's landing teams had pulled back to the main square, setting up a temporary base near the beacon tower. The air smelled of rust and ozone, and every shadow looked like it might move. No one spoke much. Even the sound of the wind felt like a warning. Captain Arya Corin stood beneath the ruined tower, watching the blinking light of the SOS beacon. It was still transmitting, still repeating the same message that had brought them here, though now they understood its meaning had twisted over time. For the survivors, that signal wasn't a call for help. It was a curse that reminded them of monsters from the sky. Monsters who looked like her. She touched her comlink. Status report. Lieutenant Ren Armitage answered from inside the command tent. Scans show more movement in the northern ruins. The locals are watching us, but they're not approaching. I've also detected energy spikes from the underground complex, something reactivated when we accessed the beacon. Any idea what it is? Corin asked. Not yet. The system's ancient, but it's trying to run some kind of automated defense routine. I've shut down the transmitter to prevent more signals from leaking, but it keeps rebooting itself. Corin sighed. Keep it under control. The last thing we need is another misunderstanding. But misunderstanding was already everywhere. That evening, while the Marines secured the perimeter, a small group of survivors approached under a white flag, if it could be called that. It was just a piece of cloth tied to a stick. They moved cautiously, their faces hidden behind masks and rags. One of them, an older man with a limp, stepped forward. I speak for the southern clans, he said in a voice like gravel. You came from the stars, yes? Corin nodded slowly. Yes, we're here to help you. The man laughed, a dry, bitter sound. Help? Your help destroyed our ancestors. They came once long ago wearing armor like yours. They said the same thing. Then the sky burned and our cities died. Corin's stomach tightened. She looked at him closely. If something like that happened, it wasn't us. There must be, he interrupted her sharply. You lie. The stories are clear. The Deathworlders came and everything changed. He pointed at her armor. You even wear their mark. The black sun on silver. Corin glanced at her shoulder plate, where the insignia of the Deathworlder response fleet was painted. A black sunburst symbolizing endurance under impossible pressure. To these people, it must have looked exactly like the mark of death their legends described. The man lowered his hand. We want you to leave. If you stay, the ghosts will wake. The storms will follow. Before Corin could respond, the group retreated back into the fog, disappearing like smoke. Later, inside the command tent, her officers gathered for a meeting. Voss, her tactical chief, was pacing. Captain, we can't keep playing this game. They're hostile, paranoid, and possibly dangerous. We should withdraw before this turns ugly. And leave them? Corin asked quietly. Captain, they don't want to be saved, Voss said. You saw how they looked at us. They're terrified. Every minute we stay, we make it worse. Ren looked up from his datapad. I don't think it's that simple. Their entire culture's built on the story of their ancestors' fall. I think the beacon's AI might have influenced their beliefs. It kept repeating that warning about Deathworlders for generations. Imagine growing up hearing that message over and over. They probably think we're invaders. Corin rubbed her forehead. The headache had been growing since they landed. If we leave now, they'll stay trapped on this world until they die out. We can't abandon them. Voss crossed his arms. Then what do you suggest? March into their villages with gifts? Every time we approach, they hide. Every time we speak, they run. We find a way to show them who we really are, Corin said. No weapons, no armor. They need to see our faces, not our metal. That decision would change everything. The next morning, Corin took a small team and ventured toward the nearest settlement. They left their weapons behind, carrying only scanners and translation equipment. As they walked, they passed ruins overtaken by glowing vines and broken machines. Strange animal calls echoed through the fog. Eventually, they reached the settlement, a cluster of shelters built around the remains of an old transport ship. Children peered from behind walls of metal, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. When Corin stepped closer, the adults emerged holding tools that doubled as weapons. I'm Captain Arya Corin, she said slowly. We came because of the signal from your ancestors. We mean no harm. The translator repeated her words in the old dialect. The crowd murmured. Then a woman stepped forward, the same scarred leader from before. She studied Corin's uncovered face. You are human? She asked. Yes, Corin replied. From Earth. The woman's expression softened for a moment. Earth, that name is in the old songs. The place of storms and fire. Corin smiled faintly. Yes, it's not an easy world. But we survived. Just like you. That single line seemed to surprise her. She looked at the children hiding behind the metal wall and then back at Corin. Survived, she repeated, almost whispering it to herself. They spoke for hours that day. The woman's name was Lyra. Through halting words and gestures, Corin learned that the survivors were descendants of the crew from a colony ship called the Elysium. The ship had been sabotaged during a rebellion within the early coalition. It crashed here, cutting off all communication. Over centuries, their descendants forgot the truth. The warning from the AI became a legend. The story changed from beware of incoming Deathworlders to fear the Deathworlders, they bring death. Lyra showed Corin their home, a place built from the bones of old ships, powered by scavenged reactors. They had adapted to the poisoned air and the harsh storms. Their skin had changed color to protect against radiation. They had created medicine from strange plants that grew in the soil. They had survived without help. And that survival had come with a price, deep mistrust of anything from the stars. That night, when Corin returned to the landing site, she felt hope for the first time since arriving. They're not savages, she told Voss. They're survivors. Stronger than we ever imagined. Voss wasn't convinced. Captain, it doesn't matter how strong they are if they don't want our help. They think we're monsters. Then we'll show them we're not. But not everyone in the fleet agreed with her. On board the Valiant Spear, rumors spread quickly. Some officers complained that the mission was pointless. Others worried about infection or contamination. A few even suggested that the survivors should be relocated by force for their own safety. Tension ran high. That tension finally broke 2 days later. A supply team sent to deliver medical kits to the settlements never returned. When the search squad found them, their equipment was gone, their ship vandalized, and 2 crew members were missing. The survivors had captured them. Corin immediately went to negotiate, bringing only Ren and 1 Marine. They found the captured crew tied near a fire pit in Lyra's village. The villagers surrounded them, their faces painted with ash, their eyes filled with both fear and determination. Lyra stepped forward, holding a weapon made from a broken plasma rifle. Your people entered our holy ground, she said coldly. The tomb of the first ones. Corin looked at her in confusion. That's just a bunker. There's nothing holy about it, Lyra's voice rose. That place holds the dead who built this world. You desecrated it. The storms have returned because of you. A loud crack of thunder echoed overhead as if to prove her words. The people began shouting. Ren tried to explain. Lyra, the storms are natural. They've always been here. Silence, she shouted. You will all leave this world by dawn or we will make you. The tension was unbearable. One of the villagers threw a rock at Corin's feet. The Marines tightened their grip, but Corin raised her hand to stop them. She looked straight at Lyra. If I leave, your people will still be trapped here forever. Let me prove we came to help. Lyra hesitated, torn between anger and doubt. Then she pointed toward the forest. There is sickness spreading in the western clans. If you can stop it, maybe you are not liars. Maybe the stories are wrong. That single chance changed everything. Corin sent a team of medics with supplies and portable shelters. They treated the infected, shared food, and repaired broken machinery. Slowly, word began to spread that the Deathworlders were not demons. Children followed the humans through the villages, curious and smiling. For the first time, there was laughter in the ruins. But not all the survivors wanted peace. Some of the older clans, who still believed in the ancient warnings, saw the humans as a threat to their traditions. One night, as the fleet's camp slept, a group of raiders attacked. Fires erupted across the landing zone. Alarms blared. The Marines fought to control the situation, firing warning shots into the air, refusing to kill. Still, chaos spread. Smoke filled the sky. Corin ran through the fire, searching for survivors, shouting orders. She saw Lyra trying to stop her people from attacking, but they were out of control. Centuries of fear exploding all at once. In the chaos, Ren managed to broadcast a message across all local frequencies. His voice echoed through the storm. We came because of your ancestors. They asked for help. We're not your enemies. We're your family from the stars. The fighting slowed. People began to listen. Through the smoke, Corin saw Lyra lower her weapon, tears cutting lines through the ash on her face. Family, she whispered. By morning, the fires were out. The dead were buried together, human and survivor alike. The air was heavy with grief, but also something new. Understanding. Corin stood beside Lyra, watching the sunrise. We made mistakes, she said quietly. But we're here now, and we're not leaving you again. Lyra nodded. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe the monsters are gone. Corin looked at the horizon, where the clouds glowed with golden light. No, she said softly. Maybe the monsters finally learned to be human. The beacon, silent for the first time in centuries, flickered once more before shutting down completely. The old message of fear was gone. In its place, a new story had begun, one written not in warnings but in hope. The smoke from the burned settlement still drifted in the morning air when the news reached orbit. The UNS Valiant Spear had lost contact for 6 hours during the night attack, and when communication finally returned, the images that came through were shocking. Fires spreading through villages, humans and locals clashing, and panic everywhere. To anyone watching without context, it looked like an invasion. Across the Galactic Coalition's network, the story exploded. Civilian relays captured the footage and transmitted it system-wide. The headlines were harsh and fast. Deathworlders attack neutral colony. Human fleet burns forgotten world. Is this the return of the old war? The Deathworlder fleet, already mistrusted by many alien governments, suddenly became a symbol of fear once again. Captain Arya Corrin didn't even have time to sleep before the first transmission from Coalition Command arrived. The voice of Admiral Thalen filled the bridge, a cold, strict tone. Captain Corrin, you are ordered to stand down all ground operations and prepare for withdrawal pending investigation. Your actions have triggered a diplomatic crisis. The Council is demanding an explanation. Corrin stood stiffly. Her face was calm, but inside she was furious. Admiral, with all due respect, you're hearing lies. We were attacked by frightened civilians. They thought we were the monsters from their legends. We're stabilizing the situation, not causing it. The Admiral's tone didn't soften. The Council doesn't see it that way. The broadcasts show armed humans firing into populated areas. They were warning shots, Corrin said sharply. No one was killed by us. The Council doesn't care about the details, Thalen replied. They only see humans with weapons on a foreign world again. You are to evacuate and destroy all evidence of interference. Corrin clenched her fists. If we leave now, those people will die. The sickness is spreading, the storms are getting worse, and they have no way to survive another season. Your orders are clear, Captain, Thalen said. Stand down. Do not make this worse. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Voss, her tactical chief, turned to her. He's right about one thing, Captain. If we stay, the whole coalition could turn on us. Corrin stared out the viewport at the planet below. If we go, we abandon them again, and history will repeat itself. Ren Armitage entered the bridge carrying a datapad full of reports. His face was pale. Captain, you should see this. He projected a hologram showing multiple coalition ships moving toward their sector, patrol vessels, media drones, and political observers. They're coming to watch. If they see us defying orders, it'll be considered aggression. Corrin's eyes hardened. Then we'll have to finish what we started before they arrive. Down on the surface, the atmosphere was tense but calmer. The villagers were helping clean up the damage from the attack. Lyra, the leader who had once called them monsters, now stood beside Corrin as if they were allies. My people are confused, Lyra said quietly. Some still want you gone. Others believe your words. They saw you protect our children last night. That means something, Corrin nodded. Trust takes time. We'll earn it. But time was exactly what they didn't have. The Coalition's news drones had already entered orbit, scanning and recording every movement. From above, the human base looked like an armed encampment. The fleet's ships, still circling in defensive formation, were being painted as aggressors. In the command tent, Corrin gathered her senior officers. We can't outtalk the Council, she said. But we can show them the truth. Ren, can you link the planet's surface cameras to the broadcast network? Ren frowned. You mean show them what's really happening? The cooperation, the aid? Yes, Corrin said. If they want a story, we'll give them the real one. For the next 12 hours, the crew worked non-stop. They connected cameras across the settlements, transmitting footage of humans and locals rebuilding together. Children laughing as engineers fixed water purifiers, medics treating the sick, farmers learning how to use hydroponic kits. Slowly, the image of monsters began to change, but the damage in orbit was already deep. Several coalition representatives demanded to board the Valiant Spear to inspect the site of aggression. Corrin allowed it. She had nothing to hide. When the inspection team arrived, they were a mix of species, thin Andarians with glassy eyes, insectoid Kethri officials, and a single human diplomat who looked deeply uncomfortable. They walked through the ship's corridors with suspicious eyes. One of the Andarians, a tall creature with pale blue skin, spoke sharply. You came here under the pretense of rescue, Captain. Yet you've interfered with a developing culture. This is a violation of Coalition law. Corin met his gaze. That culture was once part of the Coalition. They're not primitives, they're survivors of your negligence. The Andarian hissed. Mind your tone. Humanity has no authority to judge the Council. Corin leaned forward slightly. We didn't come to judge. We came because no one else did. They called for help 200 years ago. The Council ignored them. We didn't. The room went silent. Even the human diplomat looked shaken. When the inspection ended, the officials left in silence. No one knew what they would report. That night, the storm returned, stronger than before. Thunder rolled like cannon fire and lightning split the sky. Communication with orbit flickered. The planet's unstable atmosphere made it impossible to maintain a steady signal. Ren ran into the command tent, shouting over the wind. Captain, the energy readings are off the charts. That old AI system we found, it's reactivating itself. It's connected to the weather control network. Corin's heart pounded. You're telling me the storms are artificial? Yes, it's some kind of ancient terraforming system. When the colony fell, it went rogue. It's been keeping the planet half dead ever since. And now, when we disturbed it, it's finishing what it started, Corin said grimly. Lightning struck the hills beyond the settlement, and the ground shook as explosions rippled through old energy reactors. The sky turned blood red from plasma discharge. Corin grabbed her comm. All ships, this is Captain Corin. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. Get every civilian you can to safety. But the survivors refused to run. Lyra stood in the rain, shouting at her people to move, but many stayed behind, praying to their ancestors. The storms are the gods' wrath, they cried. This is the punishment for trusting the Deathworlders. Corin didn't hesitate. She ran into the crowd herself, grabbing children and pushing them toward the shuttles. This isn't divine wrath, it's a machine, she shouted. And I can stop it. Ren followed her, holding a portable power regulator. Captain, we can override the system from the beacon tower, but someone needs to stay inside to control the shutdown. Corin didn't even pause. Then I'll do it. Ren stared at her in disbelief. You'll die if you stay down there? She smiled faintly. Someone has to show them what humanity really means. With Lyra's help, Corin fought her way through the storm toward the tower. The wind tore at their clothes and debris flew through the air like knives. The beacon's light was flickering wildly, pulsing faster and faster as if it were alive. Inside the tower, sparks rained from the ceiling. The consoles glowed red. Ren's voice crackled through her comm. I've connected the override. You have to input the shutdown manually. Corin's hands flew across the controls. Lines of ancient code scrolled past her visor. The entire structure trembled as the system resisted her commands. Sweat and rain mixed on her face. Come on, she whispered. Shut down, damn it. Outside, lightning struck the tower and the beacon exploded in light. Then, silence. The storm began to break. The clouds started to thin. For the first time in centuries, sunlight touched the planet's surface. The air shimmered with gold and blue, and the survivors fell to their knees, watching in awe. Lyra looked up at the tower, where Corin stood on the balcony, illuminated by the fading light. She did it, she whispered. The Deathworlder stopped the storm. But not everyone was cheering. In orbit, the Coalition ships were panicking. Their sensors showed massive energy fluctuations from the surface, and they assumed it was a weapon activation. The Admiral's voice thundered over the comms. Corin, what have you done? You're violating direct orders, Ren shouted back into the channel. She just saved a planet, Admiral. Maybe try saying thank you. The Admiral's reply was cut off by static. The energy pulse from the shutdown had knocked out most communications. Hours later, when the sky cleared completely, the surviving villagers gathered around the tower. The beacon was dark now, its purpose finally fulfilled. Corin walked out, her armor scorched, her hair wet and tangled, but she was alive. Lyra approached her, eyes wide with wonder. You risked your life for us, she said. Even when we hated you. Corin smiled weakly. That's what we do. We answer the call. Even when no one believes in us. Above them, the clouds parted to reveal the valiant spear glinting in the sunlight. It looked almost peaceful, like a guardian watching from heaven. But peace would not last. In the following days, as the Coalition reviewed the incident, half the galaxy argued about what had happened. Some said Corin had saved a forgotten world. Others called her a reckless outlaw who ignored the law. Protests erupted on several planets. Humanity's reputation hung on a knife's edge. On board the Valiant Spear, Corrin received one final transmission from Admiral Thalen. His voice was quiet this time, almost human. "Captain, your report has been received. Officially, you are relieved of command. Unofficially, you did something extraordinary." Corrin didn't reply. She just looked out the viewport at the planet below. Its skies now clear, its people rebuilding, their fear slowly turning to hope. Ren stood beside her. "Do you think they'll ever trust us?" he asked. "Maybe not today," Corrin said softly. "But one day, when they tell their children about the Deathworlders, maybe the story will end differently." The fleet turned slowly toward the stars. Behind them, the world that once called for help was finally free from its endless storm. And in that silence, the truth of humanity shone brighter than any beacon. When the universe cried out, they answered, no matter the cost. The days after the storm felt unreal. The air on the planet was finally clean, and the poisonous red clouds that had once covered the sky were gone. The sunlight poured down like a blessing, turning the broken land golden. For the first time in centuries, the survivors could breathe without fear. The humans from the Valiant Spear walked among them, helping rebuild houses, repairing water systems, and teaching the children how to use the new machines they had brought. The planet, once known as a graveyard, was slowly coming back to life. Captain Arya Corrin stood on a small ridge overlooking the settlement. The wind moved gently through her hair. It smelled like rain, not ash anymore. She watched the people, both human and alien, working side by side. Some laughed. Some cried. It was messy and imperfect, but it was real peace. Ren Armitage came up beside her with a small recording device in his hands. "Command wants our final report," he said quietly. "They want a statement from you personally. Something to summarize what happened here." Corrin didn't take her eyes off the horizon. "They want a statement or they want an excuse?" Ren smiled sadly. "Probably both. The coalition is split. Some of their leaders call you a hero. Others want you put on trial. That's the story of humanity, isn't it?" she said softly. "Half the galaxy thinks we're saviors. The other half thinks we're monsters." Ren looked down at the survivors rebuilding below. "After what I've seen, I don't think the truth is that simple. You showed them that being human isn't about strength or power. It's about refusing to walk away." Corrin nodded but said nothing. Her thoughts were heavy. Every decision she had made, every life saved, and every mistake, it all rested on her shoulders. Yet as she watched the children playing in the dirt, laughing freely, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. When night came, the stars returned, clearer than anyone had ever seen from that planet. The survivors gathered in the open square, lighting torches and building a great fire. Lyra stood in the center, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Once we thought the Deathworlders were demons," she said. "We thought they came to destroy us. But they came to save us when no one else did. Let this fire remind us that light can come from even the darkest places." The crowd cheered. The humans didn't know what to do at first. They weren't used to being celebrated. But when the children pulled them into the circle, they joined the dance. Music, laughter, and joy echoed through the valley. Later, Lyra approached Corrin, who was sitting quietly near the fire. "Tomorrow your fleet will leave," she said. "What will happen to us?" Corrin looked at her gently. "You'll live. You'll grow. You'll rebuild this world. The coalition will send aid once they stop arguing about politics. And if they don't, we'll send help ourselves." Lyra frowned slightly. "Why would you risk so much for people who feared you?" Corrin smiled faintly. "Because one day we were like you, alone, afraid, desperate for help. And someone answered our call. Humanity never forgot that." Lyra bowed her head. "Then we will remember you. Not as Deathworlders, as friends." When dawn came, the fleet prepared for departure. The shuttles lifted off one by one, leaving trails of light behind them. The Valiant Spear orbited high above, its engines glowing blue. The last of the survivors waved from the ground as the massive ships began to ascend into the stars. On the bridge, the crew watched the planet shrink on the screen. Voss leaned against the console, arms crossed. "Feels strange leaving after everything," he said. "Like we're abandoning them." "We're not abandoning them," Corrin replied. "We're giving them back their home. That's what we came for." Ren was already transmitting the final data logs to Coalition Command. "Do you think they'll believe us this time?" he asked. They'll believe what they want to believe, Corin said. All we can do is tell the truth. The truth, however, was complicated. When their report reached the Coalition Council, it caused chaos. Half of the delegates praised humanity for bravery and compassion. The other half accused them of breaking protocol, interfering with an independent world, and spreading their influence too far. There were fiery debates, angry broadcasts, and calls for sanctions. Yet despite the noise, something unexpected began to happen. The footage from the Valiant Spear's cameras, humans saving lives, rebuilding homes, calming terrified survivors, spread across the galactic network. Millions watched it. The same races that once feared humanity saw something they had forgotten existed: mercy. The Deathworlders were not destroyers. They were protectors. On one remote colony world, a teacher showed her students the video. She paused at the part where Corin carried a child through the storm and said softly, "This is what courage looks like." On another planet, an old soldier who had once fought against humans during the early wars watched in silence and whispered, "Maybe we were wrong about them." Not everyone changed their minds, but the story spread. It became legend, a tale told in starports, classrooms, and temples across the galaxy. Some called it the miracle of the forgotten world. Others simply called it the day the Deathworlders chose mercy. Back aboard the Valiant Spear, Corin sat alone in her cabin, recording her final log entry. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. Captain's log, final entry on mission in Darien, SOS. We came expecting to find survivors. We found something more, a reflection of ourselves. Fear can make enemies out of anyone, but compassion can turn those enemies into allies. If humanity is to survive among the stars, we must never forget that. We are not the monsters they fear. We are the ones who answer when no one else will. She stopped recording and stared out the window. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, countless and bright. Somewhere out there, she knew another signal would come one day. Another voice crying for help in the dark. And when it did, she hoped there would still be someone brave enough to answer. Weeks later, a small coalition transport arrived at the now peaceful planet. The officers who stepped out were surprised by what they saw. The once barren world was green again. Crops were growing, water flowed freely, and the survivors were thriving. They had even built a small monument near the beacon tower, a sculpture of two hands, one human and one alien joined together. At its base were words written in both languages. They came when no one else would. The report the officers sent back to the council was brief but powerful. The humans did not invade. They redeemed. Months passed. Captain Corin was quietly reassigned to a desk position while the investigation continued. Officially, she had broken protocol. Unofficially, she had saved a world. Admirals debated her fate, but she didn't care. Her mind often wandered back to that golden planet, to the laughter of children, to Lyra's final words. One night, while she was working late in her quarters, her console beeped with an encrypted transmission. It was short, just a few lines of text sent through civilian channels. Message received, to Captain Corin. The crops are growing. The storms are gone. We tell our children your story every night. Thank you, Lyra. Corin smiled, a tired but genuine smile. She looked out at the stars again and whispered, "You're welcome." Then something caught her eye. A faint signal blinking on her display. It was weak, almost lost in the background noise of space. But it was there. Another SOS Wren entered her office a moment later holding a coffee mug. "Captain, I thought you were done for the night." She nodded toward the screen. "Looks like someone else needs help." Wren groaned softly. "Please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking." Corin gave him a look, the same determined glint she'd had since the beginning. "We're Deathworlders, Wren. We don't run from distress calls." Wren sighed but smiled. "Then I guess I better get the crew ready." Within hours, the Valiant Spear was once again on the move, engines roaring to life. The crew gathered at their stations, tired but eager. Outside, the stars stretched before them like an endless ocean, full of danger, mystery, and hope. As the ship accelerated into the void, the weak SOS signal grew clearer, repeating the same desperate message. "Please, help us." Corin stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic map ahead. "Set a course," she said softly. "Let's answer the call." The Valiant Spear disappeared into the stars, leaving behind only a faint blue trail. On the quiet planet below, the people looked up and saw the streak of light moving across the sky. They cheered not in fear but in faith, because now, across the galaxy, everyone knew the truth. When the universe cried out for help, it was the Deathworlders who answered. And wherever their fleet went, hope followed.